Hi, I am Physics.
Welcome back to the CODCAST. I forgot my fishing rod. There we go. We're fishing at night today. That's good.
It is. Well,
So I feel like I haven't talked to you in a week, but we have. We've talked quite frequently, actually.
we actually went and got Mexican food and twice, but
Yes, we did.
it does feel like a long time since we've touched base.
Right. Hope everyone. I'm gonna pop my chat out so I can see people. There we go. Yay. We do it in chat order. And then the number of people watching. I don't know why this is so hard. There we go. Okay.
There's always something.
It is. Like my mic is like halfway across the room. There we go. Alrighty then. Hello. So this is where Winnie and Fizicks sit around and fish in a Minecraft boat and talk about all kinds of stuff. Like solve the problems of the universe, basically.
I wish.
It's a podcast, but it's a CODCAST because we're fishing.
It's all about the COD.
Yep, we don't actually play the game. We discovered that playing the game distracts us from talking.
Because that's what y'all really want to hear is the both of us just prathering away. We know it. That's
right?
Really what you want to hear.
It is. You don't care about the game. You just want to hear us talk. That is the truth. Speaking of truth.
Yes.
I have a question.
Okay.
Which I'm hoping will be the theme of today's show. And that is, it occurs to me in all of the political morass that we've been swimming through the last couple of months, years, decades, that it is increasingly difficult to tell the difference between something that is true and something that is a lie. How do we help people figure out what's true and what's a lie?
Oh, that's a really good question.
Mm-hmm.
Because
it's not easy.
Because a perspective, like I live in a very gray world, and my parents live in a very black and white world, and which I'm sometimes kind of jealous of, honestly. But the thing about it is, like, perspective matters, and situation matters. But at the same time, if you're standing in the middle of a road and a bus is coming at you, that bus exists, and there's a truth to that because the bus is gonna win.
Yes. You can't just turn around and say, oh, I don't want to look at the bus, therefore the bus doesn't exist. You're still going to get hit.
Exactly.
Just saying. So avoidance is not the same as truth. Okay. That's a good one. It's a good principle. I think, so I'm a literature major, which means a large part of my education revolved around rhetoric and the study of the use of language to persuade people. And all of the different ways you can persuade people with untruths. So things that we use in advertising all the time. One of my favorites is called the argument of authority. It's a false argument, but it's one we use all the time. That is where you get some very nice looking person and put them in a doctor's uniform in a doctor's office. And even though there's a little piece of text across the bottom of the screen that says, actor representation or whatever they're supposed to say legally, it is someone in a position of perceived authority telling you that the product they're selling is the best product there is. And it will fix all of your problems. Right? That's an argument by authority.
And isn't that true though? Like,
no.
The white coat doesn't mean it's true.
Nope. The white coat does not mean it's true. The white coat doesn't mean anything. And in fact, if they're selling it through advertising, their main focus is taking your money. Do I think there are valuable drugs that people need in order to live and survive and treat things? Yes, absolutely. 100%. Do I think pharma's out of control? A little bit. But I'm talking more like toothpaste, right? Like, is it maybe Sensodyne is the brand that recently has had a whole bunch of clinician type looking people telling you how great their product is. So there's that. There's the voice of authority. We perceive people in positions of authority as truth tellers, right?
Yes. And I mean, we've gotten to the point where it's like people's brains can be hacked. Like, we are animals
Oh
and
yeah.
we have preferences. We have biological mechanisms that are triggered under different circumstances, and advertisers are actually well versed in this.
Hmm.
And does that mean over time we can get a nerd to some of that? Sure. Can we get more
Sure.
savvy? Yes. But you also have to be cognizant of that. Like, just name recognition, whether it's good or bad, makes a difference. If you walk up and you've heard one person's name over the other, whether it's positive or negative, that actually creates an inclination for you, in case of voting, to vote for the name you're
Hmm.
more familiar with.
Yeah. It's part of the reason many campaigns focus so much on ads, because the more you hear of a candidate, the more likely you are to vote for them, regardless of their politics. Because the more you hear about them, the more familiar they become. And that familiarity is also a false argument, right?
Right. It doesn't always breed contempt, like the saying says.
Right, right. Well, it's we tend to, what was that? I just threw something over my shoulder. A bow.
Yeah, Bo.
Um,
You can go grab it.
I am. I'm gonna try to do it in third person here, hoping
Ooh,
that
I've
it'll
got a
float to the
mending.
top.
I have a curse
Nice.
of vanishing with mending. That seems kind of ridiculous.
Look at that. I'm right back. Right back where I started. Beautiful. Okay, it is a curse of vanishing bow. God.
I mean, if it's good enough, like, I mean, how often do you die now?
There was no other enchantment. It's just curse of vanishing.
Oh, you should have kept it so I could use it for dispensers.
Oh, well. We're not playing the game anymore, so,
Well, sometimes I will, I guess. And
dispensers
defend
come later. Okay.
bows are
Okay,
sometimes
so
expensive, especially if you don't have a
yeah,
skeleton farm. Which, do we have one here? I don't know. See, game
we
gets in the way.
no, I don't think so. I don't think so. So therefore I do not. Oh, so that's the other thing is a willingness to say you don't know something is really important for building trust in someone's truth versus lie detector thing.
And also
You
a
know, like
willingness to listen, to be like, okay, I'm not the expert in this. I may know something and have an opinion, but like, listen to where things are going instead of, yeah, and then adding your opinion after you've heard more of the discussion, I think is kind of a good way to look at it. But
yeah. Well, I think I hear what you're saying. So if you're talking to someone who is a doctor, like actual doctor in real life. No, I'm not saying every doctor is correct, but I'm going to believe an actual doctor over something that I've seen on social media or read on the internet or seen in a commercial
I mean,
before. Like, I'm going to prioritize that information. I still might go off and do my own verification.
I like reading peer-reviewed studies to
Yes.
validate and see, like, how often has the study been taken, like what is a double-blind study, how long has this medication, like a lot of medications have been out there forever, so like, is the one
Yeah.
being
A
recommended
lot
is
of
just
data.
some variant of it, and so the pharmaceutical company can get more money, so the
Hmm.
patent doesn't expire. Like, yeah, what's going on? um but I'm wonky and like to research stuff, so
It's
that
important though. Like, I
that may
think,
not be
and
practical for everybody.
I think in the age of the internet, so the internet's a double-edged sword, right?
Right.
It simultaneously provides you with an unheard of amount of information at your fingertips in order to verify things.
But it also curates that experience.
Well, it not only curates it, but it doesn't make a significant difference. Search engines, I primarily blame. Did, there's no significant difference between information that's false and information that's valid or based on fact.
Right. And then
You
that gets
know,
into your truthiness concept.
yes, that gets into the.
It feels
Well, and then
right,
there's
therefore it maybe has a higher sense of being correct or truth just because it fits
right
within your perspective,
worldview.
worldview. Thank
Yeah,
you. Yes.
yeah, yeah. So you got to be careful of that. That's another false argument. Is the perception of self as the expert.
Well, that's why it's like
That
my
is.
philosophy. I have a new philosophy. I say new. I've been trying to use it for quite a while in this little political arena, which is if I hear something that makes me extraordinarily happy or extraordinarily mad, I research it more because somebody's
Yes.
toying with my emotions. Like they
Emotions.
want me to
Yep.
have an emotional, visceral response. Therefore, that means that they're
It's
trying to
sus.
sell. Basically, it's sus. It's
It's
selling me on
sus.
something.
If
Yeah.
it makes you mad, it's sus. If it makes you super happy or feel vindicated, it's sus.
Right.
You
And
know?
especially if it's directed at a particular person or group. It's like
Yeah.
I don't want to be mad at anybody. I don't have any ill will. I don't want to cultivate those feelings because I think those are actually very toxic.
Yeah, and I don't know what the rhetorical term it is for the kind of argument that deflects a situation onto a particular group of people. So it's a blaming argument. Like the reason X is happening is because of this group of people. Like
Mm.
that
Well,
that
it's
whole
very primal. Like
stereotyping, like it's very human to do it.
we like to categorize. Like we have a difficult time conceptualizing groups larger than 200.
Yeah.
So if you can then pull people out into an other, then they're dehumanized.
Yeah.
And then we feel
It's
less
easier to dehumanize them.
responsibility. Yeah, then you feel less responsibility to them, and then you can be less empathetic, and then you can.
Blame
It's
them.
blame them. Yes, exactly. I was trying to think of a different direction to go with that, but I mean, it's been a very powerful tool for since the beginning of human society to create an other. And to blame those problems, it's an easy way to blame problems is having an other group instead of taking
Right.
on the hard work of trying to figure out very nuanced, difficult problems that we have. Yeah, but the how do you get to the truth of the
How
matter?
do you get to the truth? I think so. It's further complicated. We're gonna list all the complications, and then we'll talk about approaches for fixing them. Research is a great approach, self-research, but you got to watch what your sources are. Like, are your sources studies by accredited institutions? There are a lot of studies out there, some of which are total bunk, like just total BS. So, was it a study sponsored by Johns Hopkins, which is an accredited, well-known research institution in Baltimore? Or was it, you know, West Area Divisional Conference University? And you're like, I've never heard of that.
Or a foundation that was specifically created to
Oh, to do the study?
do the
Yeah,
study,
was
like,
it
and then
like,
it's like, where's the money?
American Medical Trust Foundation funded this, right? What
Right.
is it? Like,
There's an
and you can see
education
this.
one. It was like there's one that talks about education that sounds like it's a government institution when in fact it's um a very
Private research organization?
yes, but it's religiously backed with a very narrow
Ah,
focus.
yeah. Yeah, so know the institutions. Like, you can go to Wikipedia and look up any institution, and by and large, say this with caveats, because anybody can go change Wikipedia if you get permission to be an editor. By and large, the information on Wikipedia, because it's curated by so many people, generally leans towards fact because it's self-checking, right?
Mhm.
Like there are an equal number of people that are putting false information are also out there policing that false information.
It's also
I think
like
you always
singing. If you have a big enough group, then the voices can meld and sound
yeah,
harmonious.
exactly. Mhm. So if you ever wonder like, oh, this sounds like a weird publication, go look on Wikipedia, see who founded it and why, that organization, what their mission is, go to their website and look at it. And if it's like founded by some super PAC or founded by some organization with a motivation that is either financially or politically or power driven, look at it with skepticism. Skepticism is so important.
Well,
However,
I guess part of too is like what part of like how are you looking at it from your like kind of analyze your own worldview and be
yeah,
like how am I digesting this information? Is it being filtered by how I'm looking at it versus how it was intended to be presented? That could make a
yeah,
difference
question everything.
to the point that nothing matters, right?
I mean, kind of. I don't know.
I would say
And
life is too serious to be taken seriously.
that's very true. But yeah, truth, how to figure out if something's true. I think the other thing I would highly recommend to folks, and this is probably the hardest thing to do, and that is expand your sources.
Right.
So if you're used to getting your information from one or two places and you're starting to feel like something's not jiving with the kinds of things you're hearing, that they don't make sense a lot of the time, you probably need to broaden your perspective. Go find another media outlet. Go find another news program. Go
It's
do a
like,
different search engine.
who are their references? And then kind of check out the source
Mhm.
material and be like, oh, okay. Like read and look at papers and
Yeah.
I don't know. Go to
Like
go to your
if
libraries.
I think it's one of the best websites I've seen recently that have come up that I'm definitely going to go try to get a subscription to. Um, and I can't remember the name of it. What is the news thing? We've mentioned it before. It's not Grounded.
Grounded? Yeah, that sounds like one.
Ground News. I think it's called Ground News, right? I'm
Yeah.
sure you can Google it and find it. But one of the things they're doing is very different. They have a summary of the day's headlines and information and articles and everything that every major news station is putting out there. And they have a key on each one of them that says, does this news organization tend to lean left or lean right or be very centric? Does this article have a left or right leaning spin to it? Has it been validated? Does it have reasonable amounts of citations and is based on fact, or is it total crap? They have like a really amazing, and they're a nonpartisan, non they're a private company that started because they were so tired of how misleading the news industry can be on both sides.
Yeah, but you can have the same article with completely different headlines and you can take away something different from it just
Yeah,
from the
well, and they
lens.
have that. There's a feature on there that's called compare or something where it'll show you exactly the same article from from a left organization and a right organization to show you. And then they have another one that says like things that aren't being reported. So world news and other important information that's not making the rounds because it's not circulating. Like it's not new, sensational enough. So it might be a headline in the UK or Canada, and we're just not covering it at all. Or vice versa, it might be a headline here, but it's being suppressed because a particular political party or interest group or whatever doesn't want it in the media or is doing a great job distracting the media with other things.
Shiny toy, shiny toy, shiny toy. Squirrel.
Yeah, yes, pretty much. So you got grounded
I
news.
know, I have to say, I said squirrel, and Waffles looked up. My dog Waffles looked up at me. He's like, "Wait, what?"
You're like, what? Squirrel? Is there a squirrel? Let's see squirrel.
Oh, I said his name too many times. Now he's coming over to me.
I think the other thing that I use when trying to determine if something's true or not is the KISS rule, which is the keep it simple, stupid.
Mm-hmm.
So if it is by and large in life, the most reasonable explanation is usually the simplest. That's not always true, but I think that's probably a good 80% rule, which we were talking about last week. To say, is it more or less likely that pets were being consumed in an American city? It is very unlikely.
Well, it is a trope
Very
that comes up
unlikely.
every so often. Like it's not. It's
It does. And if you go do research on this topic, you will discover that it has been a
dog
what is
whistle.
called a dog whistle type of news story that has been used against different populations for the last 100 years in our country.
Mm-hmm.
That it is a repeatedly used tactic by one or other political side to make a particular community or race seem scary and other.
Or doesn't
And if
fit
you
your
knew
moral
that,
compass or your
doesn't fit- yeah.
your societal norms.
Whatever it is, that makes them other.
Yes.
And so if you knew this, if you knew that that had been a technique used in the media, like specifically in the 1970s and then again back in the 1920s, and even as far back as the 1880s during Reconstruction was another one, you would say, oh, instead of thinking falsely that people were consuming pets, you would say, oh, this is a political tactic, a media tactic. And so I can question whether or not this is something that is grounded in fact. And it is not grounded in fact.
Well, I'm curious about your take on people's willingness to continue repeating something that they know has no supporting basis. Like it may not be, let's say it's not disproven, let's give them credit to that extent, but it hasn't had any fundamental support, proof that it is true. And yet, and propagating that lie puts people in danger or creates a pressure. Do you have a thought about propagating on that?
I do. I have a theory. I have probably a very human and important theory.
Okay.
I believe that people repeat things that they hear to their group, their social group, their friends group, their family group, their social media group, because it gives them a sense of belonging. Right? It's a combination of I'm repeating the thing that the other people in my circle.
So you're saying that they're trying to use the language of commonality.
Try to fit in. Yes, it's a language of commonality. It's like, okay, think about being groups of kids on the playground at school who would gang up on another kid. Right? They're terrified. The people ganging up on the kid are terrified of being the victim, right? Being the one ganged up on, being the outsider. And so they repeat.
Okay, yes.
I mean, they repeat the bullying things, right? I don't think this is any different. They repeat things that they know are very unlikely
to be true
or not true.
Right.
Yeah.
And it's just a
But they
sense
do
of
it to create a sense of belonging,
okay.
to create a sense of togetherness. Like, and it's a terrible, I mean, I, it's not terrible. It's just human,
But is that
right?
something that should be championed, or like, or should we as a society have judgment against it? Like, like should that be something that we just shrug off as human nature, or is it something that we try
No.
to expose and say that we don't appreciate this as a mechanism within
For
our
making
society, or
connections.
making
Yeah.
connections, or participating in our society? This is not who we want to be as a society.
Yeah.
Or is it?
Yeah.
I mean,
Propagating untruths, lying to try to feel like you're belonging, not a great thing.
or taking
It's not
advantage
good
of
for
a
your,
situation,
it's really
or
bad for your mental health too. Did you know this?
to have to
That
keep track of lies.
lying to yourself is horrible. Not just lying about things in the external world, but like I read this, there's a trick. Like, instead of saying I can't get this done, or I can't do that, you have to put the onus of the decision on yourself. I choose not to do it. And you can have a reason, like I'm too tired,
Yeah.
or I don't have the energy, or whatever, but you have to acknowledge your participation in the decision. Like, it's not that you can't do it, it's that you choose not to. And it's okay to choose not to.
I keep thinking
But
like
the
I've gotten to the
it's a
point.
lot,
Yeah. I keep thinking it was like
right?
I'm like a professional procrastinator. Like
Yeah,
and so
me too.
sorry, I'm laughing at that. Sorry I spoke over you on that. But no, it was like I've been going to a lot of events dealing with entrepreneurs, and one of the things is that to be a good entrepreneur, you have to delude yourself into thinking that it's possible to do what you're doing,
Yep.
when all
Yes.
other evidence tell you it's not.
Tells you otherwise. Yeah.
Yes. So that's
I
what
think
I was
that's a
thinking
similar
of.
thing. Like, I think you have to say, I choose to believe that I'm going to make this happen.
Because plenty of
Right?
people
Make
can
it
come
a
up with,
choice.
even
Yeah.
I can always come up with good reasons why things can't happen or shouldn't happen, or
Sure.
in that
But it's
context
such
of
a,
entrepreneurship.
like, and I tried it. Like, I tried it because I had a really bad night the other night where I didn't sleep at all. Like, I had high levels of anxiety and anxiety attacks, for various reasons, particularly our current political situation. And I didn't sleep. And then when I finally took something to help me sleep, it like tanked me. Like, I took it way too late. And so when I woke up, I was still just like, I was non-functional. And so I'm dithering about, and I find myself saying, I can't stream this morning. Like, I can't even talk. My eyes aren't even open. And then I was like, no, I choose not to stream because I am functionally incapable of running a stream right now.
Right.
And
You
so
wanted to
I
give a good
choose to reschedule.
experience. Right.
Yeah, I choose to reschedule because that's going to be the better thing for me, for my channel, and for my audience. And so I sent a little note out, in the community chat, and was like, hey, not streaming today. Switching to Wednesday, Thursday, Friday instead. No problem. But the act, like, taking the onus of that choice onto myself, like, it made such a difference in my feelings of guilt about not streaming. You know what I mean? Like, to take ownership of the decision
Right. No,
was
that's
very, like, hugely important.
that is important. I think that's actually a really interesting concept of that changes perspective. Is like the reality of
It does.
the reality of it is that the events didn't change. Like you did not end
Yeah,
up
no, nothing.
streaming that
I
day,
didn't do anything different. Yeah, I didn't do anything different.
but it wasn't a powerlessness within you. It was a strategic decision to how to
Yes.
structure that day and then your following days within your week.
Exactly. And
And I think
it
that's
made
pretty
me
powerful.
feel, it is powerful. Like, and it was something so simple. I choose to do this thing because of X, Y, and Z instead of just that kind of I can't feels like this horrible brick wall with a walled in window that's like you can't even get through the window, you know? Like it
Right.
just
Well,
and then you feel stuck in that room.
I look at it a lot. It's like I chose fairly early on in my career or life to look at things as having options, always having options. They may not be the best options. They may not be the ones that I prefer to have, but I always have options. And
Mhm.
so instead of looking at being like, okay, I'm cornered into doing something, it's like, no, you always have options. You may not like your options, but you do
Yeah.
have the agency to choose and pick a direction that's going to best move you to who or where or what you want to be. And I think that level of agency didn't, I think, enabled me to move forward and take advantage of situations that otherwise wouldn't have existed had I just felt like I didn't have a choice.
Yeah. I think that's the thing. Like when you tell people they always have a choice and the kind of the instinctive reaction is to say no I don't, I need the paycheck, or no I don't, they're my parent, I can't get away, or no I don't, they're my spouse,
Mm-hmm.
and
But it's still a choice, and you need to
and I'm
recognize and
stuck.
own that.
And but it is still a choice. It doesn't mean that the choice to try to change your circumstance isn't going to be hard or isn't going to be literally impossible without help.
Right.
Like it doesn't mean that it's not going to be hard. It doesn't mean that it's not going to result in a huge change in your lifestyle or your circumstances or
It's not a
but
panacea.
no.
Doesn't
And
it
it
won't
doesn't mean
necessarily
that
make
it's
things
easy.
easier. Yes,
Like I know I
exactly.
mean it's easy. It's easy from the cheap seats too. Like it's I have struggled in the past with relationships with people where I really, really, really just wanted to cut them out of my life. And for, a number of reasons that was not possible. Um, and I've experienced that as a young adult in my 20s, where I had a parent that I didn't talk to for 2 years um, because of various things. And it actually took a lot for me to reach back out again. Not that I had actually processed any of the emotions that caused that separation, but whatever. We get to that. But
Uh,
it was easy for me to do because I was a young adult and they lived in another state,
right, but I
right?
think you did
So
create different boundaries for your, maybe not for the relationship, for at least for yourself on the approach of like what that relationship was going to look like, that you had more control and agency of
yeah,
when versus where it was when that separation happened.
exactly. Yeah, I chose how to interact and under what circumstances, and that has made all the difference.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and but I've also had relationships where I was like, no, I choose to never interact with this person again, despite how hard it is, like, and how weird it may feel. It is. This brings me to another thing. Curate your online experiences, people. This is if you find yourself doom scrolling and there are things that are going by your feed that make you mad or uncomfortable or you don't like it or they're annoying, freaking unsubscribe or block. Just nobody cares. Just curate your experience because you are in charge of the experience that you have online. Like I was with, and the first time I did this is many, many years ago. I worked with a community of co-writers, and a writing group is not always the most healthy group of people on the planet.
Hey, we're all
And
walking wounded. Come on.
we're all walking wounded. We really are. But there were a couple of people in our group who were just vile. Like they picked on new people. they were mean. I don't I'm not sure why. It was just bad vibes, right? Like just some they were jackasses, they were mean, they were questioned authority. I mean, there's nothing wrong with that. But they were just toxic. And I, as one of the administrators of the group, I was like, I don't mind dealing with them professionally through the various mechanisms of the rules that we have around this writing experiment. So, but I am no longer going to let their personal, like,
Grievances.
rambling hate, like, affect me. And so I unsubscribed from all of their journals. Like 6 or 7 people. And oh my God, it was such a huge relief. Like suddenly my feed was only full of things that like questions and answer groups and people posting their happy posts and, like curate your online experience. If you want to make the choice to challenge yourself with off-putting things, that's fine. That's on you. But don't be afraid to make it a better experience, I think. But then that goes right back to the whole
What do you
thing I was going to say in relation to truth and lies, which
Okay.
is don't stay in your own bubble too long.
Well, okay.
Right?
I for a lot of years, and I've talked about this before, so but pretty much my entire adult life, when I was trying to be a responsible person, I believed that know thy enemy. I come from a military background, which I've mentioned many times, and it's extraordinarily important to have a true understanding of the perspective of your adversaries. How are they going to approach things? What are their tendencies? How do they process the world? And I felt like that was extraordinarily important, which led me to spend a lot of time in media groups that had very traumatizing, horrific things to say about like gay people, minorities, women in the military, like really just terrible things and dehumanizing things. And frankly, I got to the point where I was like, you know what? This may be the discourse in this arena, but I don't need to hear it. I know what they're going to say. As long as I like peer into it, I don't need to be intimately familiar with the dog whistles and their attacks,
Their rhetoric.
To know that it doesn't fit my worldview, or to even be able to talk around it and be aware of their position, because it is toxic, and I didn't appreciate what that was doing to me as a person. So it was just like, I'm gonna quit taking that to such, I wouldn't say an extreme, but it's like you can back off and realize that you certainly can take a different reasoning towards curating your content and still be aware of discourse across groups. Is that
so you can go check them out because you should, but it does not mean you need to stay inundated in that negativity.
One thing that was pointed out to me in my obsessiveness of trying to keep current recently is that we often overlook the reasoning behind the kernel of truth, or the feeling of disconnection that's out there for
Okay, can you give me an example?
Okay, why they're talking about eating cats and dogs.
Okay.
Why would they be talking about eating cats and dogs? And it's like, you have a community that's culture is changing, and people who have lived there no longer recognize it. That is a legitimate concern for that community of defining who they are as a people. Now, to phrase it as people are eating cats and dogs, hide that complexity and struggle that is happening within that community with something that's utterly false. So the language being used around it to me is polarizing and not productive to a course of action that could actually have people bind together to recognize legitimate areas of concern and problems that exist.
I think that is a valid perspective. My understanding is that the rumor is actually grounded in a particular police report
Oh yeah,
of a missing pet that someone
right.
filed, and that the changes to her community led to her misstating
We're just
that
being
she thought
flippant. I just felt like,
just being flippant about, oh, maybe, and I'm sure it was not meant seriously, but my cat is gone and maybe they took it and ate it. And within 24 hours, the cat had been trapped in the basement and she found it. And then she discovered
she had the
this poor
wherewithal
lady
to go and apologize to her
to go
neighbors.
apologize. Like, she discovered that the rumor had taken on this horrible political lent and been propagated throughout social media and the mouths of babes, literally. And she went and apologized to her neighbor, which is the origin point of the rumor. Now, this community, my understanding is that the only problem that the city manager had pointed out to the governor was that they were having issues with housing.
Mm-hmm.
And they needed solutions for housing based on the increased population, but that local businesses were hiring the new legal immigrants into their businesses. Like, there was actually job opportunities as part of the reason these folks went there, that there were guaranteed jobs based on new industries rising up in this particular place.
Mm-hmm.
And so, the community, to their credit, was doing an amazing job adjusting.
Right.
But yes, I hear you that,
So in it,
unsettling nature of things changing sometimes makes people behave in ways they normally wouldn't.
right, and I threw that
People don't
out,
like
and I think
change.
your point was better towards housing. Like that's probably
Yeah.
the underlying. And my point was like there is probably an underlying issue that we're not addressing because of the heatedness of the rhetoric.
Yeah,
And
and
I
it's
find
housing.
that problematic. I'm like we're purposely creating noise that is divisive, which in fact is not a productive way to go about I think being a leader, honestly.
Yeah.
I mean, because anytime
And
you
credit to the city manager and the police officers and the governor even, and the mayor, who've all done just an incredible job validating that there is no truth, no supporting evidence for any of the rumors about pets being consumed, and urging people in the media to just shut the hell up.
right, leave it alone.
I mean, but in
Like,
much more
but
politically
it's
correct terms, because it's harmful. The problem is that this has now resulted in multiple dozens of bomb threats
yes,
to local schools and businesses,
which is disruptive and
which is horribly disruptive and just frankly uncalled for. And it's not just, Americans playing pranks. This is actually foreign interests
mm-hmm.
who have discovered a weakness, and are harassing US citizens
Yes.
and causing these problems because, we're approaching an election event. Oh, it's very disturbing. And you'll say, okay, well, what about the footage of them like protesting in the street? Yes, there was a group of Haitians in an apartment complex protesting their living conditions because their apartment manager had not addressed basic needs like pest control and
Utilities working.
correctly working utilities. And they
Yeah.
were protesting this slumlord and their inability to maintain the units that they were paying for.
I have to
You
say,
know,
I've noticed like your agitation level has gotten up because you're like spamming your fishing line.
yeah, exactly. I do. I gotta keep my hand off the mouse button.
Like it's like if we
Like,
were on land right now, she would be pacing back and forth with like a
I
very
would.
definitive like Winnie walk of like this way, that way.
Yes, I get agitated. I do it at home. I do it in person too. Get riled up. Anyway, so this is like goes right back to this core of how do you tell a truth from a lie.
Right.
And it's an important thing to know that what's the cliche is that most rumors are grounded in truth. And while that may be so, the way a rumor metamorphosizes over time can have very terrible consequential effects
And
on
peer
real
pressure
people.
is real. Like
Yeah.
I did see a study, and I'll just say it was just a one-off thing. So it was just literally they would show a picture of different lines, and some were visibly shorter than others, and so they would ask a person pick out the longest line, and it was obviously longer by a third, and then they would pick them out 100% of the time, and then they got a group who were paid or thrown in there like 5 other people who all just said convincingly that another one was the longest line. Like, oh, number 2 instead of number 3. No, it really is number 2. It's an optical illusion. It's number 2. And a majority of the time, since I'm not vested in this, they would change their world. They would be like, oh, I guess it is number 2. So I'll pick number 2. Peer pressure, and just being like, you think you must be missing something. If so many people around you are so confident in this piece of information, it's like, what's going on? I don't know how to combat that either, but isn't that fascinating?
It's to be able to recognize it as a sales technique. It's a sales technique. It's a technique for getting you to not to believe yourself. It's gaslighting. Like
Yeah,
at
it's
its
gaslighting.
fundamental level, it's gaslighting.
Do you know the original
it's trying
play?
to convince you that the thing you're seeing in front of your face is not true.
Are you familiar with the original gaslighting play?
No.
So it literally is this play about a woman who's in a terrible abusive relationship, like mentally abusive, and she's told that she's home alone, but the gas lamps in the apartment keep going brighter and softer because that's what happens when somebody else is there and is turning on and off lamps throughout the house. And so it's literally gaslighting of her husband would tweak with it and then tell her that nobody was there, nobody was messing with it. It's a figment of your imagination that these gas lamps are changing vibrancy. That's just showing how crazy you are. So that's
so the name of the movie is actually Gaslight.
I believe so. Yeah.
The play. Yeah, it's a 1938 thriller play set in 1880s London, written by Patrick Hamilton.
And there is a movie too. But Gaslight. I thought that was really interesting. I thought you might be familiar with it as a...
I have heard of Gaslight. I did not realize that's where the phrase... Yeah, there is a movie. Vincent Price was in the Broadway production. Oh my God, it played on Broadway for a long time.
And the concept might have existed prior to that, but that was definitely a cultural embracement of the concept.
Was it made into a movie? Yeah. There's a film, a 1940 British film called Gaslight, and then a 1944 American film. It was released in Britain as The Murder in Thornton Square. Wow. And there was an Australian version in 1958, a Polish version in 1961. Oh, that's great. Okay. Who knew? Famous, amazing plays, gaslights, where we get the expression gaslighting. Yeah. So it's the somebody repeatedly telling you something you're observing is not true and you being convinced that it is. And it's such an emotion. It's a
I-
mentally and emotionally exhausting experience to have too.
it
Like
is.
to know that you're right and what you remember or experience or saw, like to know that, and then to have somebody you either trust or love or is in a position of authority telling you over and over and over again that what you perceive is wrong is
It undermines your confidence.
horrible. It's horrible for your mental health. It's absolutely horrible. It's traumatizing. I mean, in the worst way. Anyway, I don't know how we got into
Well,
gaslighting, but
because we're
because
talking
it's a
about
technique
truth.
being
Because we're
used.
talking
Yeah,
about truth.
in
Like,
a
how do you
meeting.
determine truth? And it's like being gaslit
Yeah.
is another problem towards getting to the truth or be able to hold on to it.
Mhm.
So this, so what was this supposed to be an uplifting uplifting
No. No,
episode?
because I think that this is such an important question. How do you know? Because we have such, like, I've watched people say this in passing on podcasts over the last few weeks where we have this in the media, especially, and in the news and entertainment news media, there is such a disrespect and a disregard for fact. Like, it is just this constant cycle of one station or news outlet gaslighting another in terms of what's actually happening. And it's because they're being selective about what they're reporting. Like, it's a combination of gaslighting, selectivity, sensationalism, and spin and rhetoric, which is a form of rhetoric.
Hmm.
So if you don't know, rhetoric is fundamentally the study of how to manipulate language in order to convince people of things, whether or not they're true. It is the manipulation of language is rhetoric.
Hmm.
Um, and
Well,
there are great examples of that that I support. Like, somebody
well,
baiting someone throughout a debate.
well,
I
I
take the
did
bait every time, and it results in, like, how does it feel to murder someone on live TV? Yeah.
it goes to character. I really, um, we talk about it a lot of like for hiring practices, and I'm moving a little bit because you said take the bait, because
Yep.
that shows a lot of what somebody finds important, their ability
Yep.
to be easily manipulated because of their pathology, and I don't say that as a doctor term, but like just as this just
Yep.
the mental state of all people have their own predilections. Um, that got me. So when hiring people or working with people, it's like you don't look necessarily for the person who has exactly the skills that you're looking for the job. You're looking at somebody who has the ability to process problems and to grow and be able to get that information. And that is like the character value of a person and not necessarily the exact skill sets. So
Yeah, it's
it's
the qualitative. It's a qualitative? No. Yeah.
yeah,
Instead of quantitative. So quantitative values are things like what's on their resume. They worked at this type of job for 6 years, right?
right. 6 years
They say they
experience, they
demonstrate
can
they can
coding or
type, they can use Excel, whatever. Those are quantitative, things that are measurable, right? And you hope that they're telling the truth. But the interview is about determining the qualitative values of someone. Do they have good judgment? Um, do they have good judgment? Also, do they have good judgment? That's
you
sorry,
keep saying that good
on
judgment,
that.
good judgment.
But yeah, but yeah, can they, you know, whatever it reads on paper when you're conversing with them, are you now convinced that they could handle um a multi-part complex process in order to complete the work, right? Like, do they seem like they would be overwhelmed by that or not? Um, one of our best hires, this is one of my favorite stories to tell. One of our best hires at our company, early days, the first company I worked for, which was very small. And we were looking for more people to train up as analysts because we worked on contracts that were required a lot of analyzing current workflows and identifying places where technology could be applied to those workflows. And you needed people who were good with people and were able to sit back and let somebody else be the expert and just document it well and maybe, have a pretty good grasp of time management and scheduling. And we hired the young lady who managed the local gym. And I think her degree was in physical education. And she was a well-paid, middle management position at a very successful gym. And we hired her away from the gym because she was so good at her job. Right? And then we felt like the skills that she had would make a really good translation to our company's business. And she ended up being a senior project manager, and as far as I know, still works in the industry, 25 years later.
Which would generally be considered a very technical industry. So like hiring somebody from a gym didn't fit
with a background in PE.
Right.
Right? To work on object-oriented diagrams that determined how software was being built for
Right.
military medical systems. But she was amazing at it. Like, she was just phenomenal.
It didn't hurt that our boss had a physical education undergrad degree.
Really?
Yeah. She was a professional volleyball player.
Oh, you're talking about Karen. I'm saying. Simpro.
Oh well, I mean, Simpro came
this
from.
This was not a hire. Not a hire that. Yeah.
Yeah.
It was a spinoff of that company, but no, that was not a direct hire. It was after Karen was gone.
Yeah, but I was thinking that sense of respect for the man might have come rubbed off from Karen.
Very possible. We also hired a completely independent person just traveling through Japan with a background in tourism. I think she was a tour guide. And we offered her a job. She worked for us for, I think, a year in Japan on the contracts. I trained her how to be an analyst at night over sake and food because she had zero training. But she was so personable and so organized and so good, and like talking to her. And we needed somebody who was willing to stay in country for a number of months and act as a project manager. That was another fun hire.
Awesome.
An amazing young lady. So yeah, sometimes it's not about, well, it's always about who you know.
Yeah. I moved up because my my fishing rod's about to break because I'm not getting any XP.
Ah.
I was like, how is that possible? How is my mending rod going to break? That started out at 100%.
That's where, put it in your offhand and let your...
No, I'm not getting any XP.
Else.
I'm just, because I had one in my offhand and it wasn't gaining anything either. That's why I went back.
You're not, like, I'm not even hearing you gain XP.
That's what I'm saying. I'm not getting XP. Whatever the reason is, I'm not getting XP.
What the heck is, there it goes.
And it was like, oh, well, that's why I moved earlier. Hopefully I'm getting it. I should be getting it now. But for the last hour plus, I haven't been getting XP. Anyways, it doesn't matter. If I lose this rod, I might magically get another one. Because they're magically delicious.
I have the other one in my other hand is also a mending rod.
Yeah.
Well, no, I'm definitely getting that XP.
I got a god rod going. I wouldn't want to lose it, but I've got plenty.
Yeah, I'm getting your XP, which is weird.
It's because we're so close. It drifts
Look,
to
but
whoever.
you didn't get mine. I'm saying that's weird. Like, I've been fishing just as much as you.
Mhm.
It's weird that it was only going one place.
I think it's just the angle that we're sitting at, and the angle I'm throwing my thing.
Yeah, you're definitely giving me your XP.
I can't.
Try.
What's that? I'm not too worried about it. I'm just letting you know. So.
Okay. Well, whatever. Okay. Minecraft mysteries. Why does XP go in a certain direction? So I can tell that's coming to me for sure. I have a magnetic personality, apparently.
Apparently, you're all sparkly. I'm not the sparkly one. I'm sarcastically funny, but not sparkly.
Oh, okay. Practical advice for people how to tell the truth from lies. So we've talked about research. We've talked about expanding your sources. Go out and look at other things. We've talked about crossing over to the dark side. People who don't necessarily share your opinions. That works both ways. Yeah, like I would go search AP Wire
Motivation
before I
of
would.
the speaker.
Oh, that's a good one. Okay. What's in it for the people telling you whatever's going on? What's in it for them? Are they being paid by someone who has a vested interest in that lie? You know, you might want to check and see who owns the media stations that you currently watch. It's
Oh, you
fascinating.
may
Or the
not want to do
newspapers.
that. It will depress you.
I will. It will really depress you. Or the newspapers you think are objective and, across the spectrum of information. Might want to see who owns them and who they donated to in this past year or 10. And what potentially that news outlet may stand to lose should they go off message. So that I think is the biggest one, is to be very sus of especially a private cable news outlet or entertainment outlet, I should say. I miss news being news. Like, I miss at 5:00 you turn on the news and they just said
They talked about
happened.
I was gonna say the local car wreck,
Like,
what the traffic
the
pattern
local
is.
car wreck, the traffic pattern was, like, what church had an Easter Sunday picnic. Like, it was just the things that happened with no commentary or opinion. The only commentary and opinion they ever put on was the people or witnesses involved, right? Like, the people standing around because they're
Just the
trying to get
facts,
the
ma'am.
story.
Just the facts.
Just the facts, man. Like, it wasn't a newscaster talking about the motivation of the criminal for the incident. Like, what the actual crap?
Yeah, it was interesting because I was had the opportunity. I was on the Canadian border, like in Buffalo, and then I crossed over, and there was a very tragic event happened. There was like a robbery and a shooting that occurred on the Buffalo side of. So it happened in America, and I got to hear both the Canadian news report of it and along with the American news report. And on one hand, the American news report would they didn't show the body, they didn't show any blood, but it was very hyper sensationalized. Like, they were the verbiage and the wording used was very ecstatic and very high energy. And when
tragic,
it was
trauma,
right. And then when I
violence
went to Canada and saw the same story being reported, it was graphic. They showed a lot of the scene that was there, but it was very measured in their approach of what they were talking about. They went through eyewitness reports of what was seen, what was verified, what was collected, the time of day that it occurred. And it was all very factual of like, this is the level of information we know now versus screaming at the top of their lungs of how tragic and horrific and unimaginable this event happened, and
And the violence in this neighborhood must be because of these reasons, and all this
right,
hypothesizing and catastrophizing.
correct. And it was just such a, to me, it was refreshing, and it was like I could understand, but I found it also very interesting on the graphicness of, like, it was like they're willing to show really the tragicness of it, which is like the blood and guts of it, yet they're not willing to sensationalize it. It wasn't meant to to scare people or salacious. They weren't trying to show blood and guts to be it was a, this is the condition that this area was left in, and this is the mark that has been made upon this area. Yes, so that, I mean, that's how I took it. May you not want your kids to see it? Sure, like that may not be a visualization that you want to send your kids to bed with. So
this is a great argument for news becoming a public utility. Well, right, because the reason they sensationalize is for money, right? Like, because they sell advertising on their news programs, and the more butts and seats they get, the more views, and you get views with sensationalism.
Yeah, but what happens if you have a government that is a strongman, or, you know, more totalitarianism and wants to control media? What happens then?
Well, there is that.
I am a huge supporter of NPR, I will say, because I think that it's, a lot of it is community focused. I always listen to different stations when I travel cross country, and I get an excellent, like, local flavor from that I appreciate. But I have also been frustrated with some of the directions of questioning had a stance that I felt didn't always benefit the conversation. And then sometimes
leading questions.
They were very leading questions, and I don't think they were meaning. They were. I think they were just. They had a position, and you could understand where their position was coming from, instead of just trying to push for specific information. But that's my own feeling on some of that. In general, though, I would say 90% of the time they're very balanced, and they want to get to the heart of the situation and try to look at it in a way that I would consider as quite balanced. So, yeah. Which is why I give them money, because I think it's important for people to have access to that. I see it much like public libraries.
Yeah. I feel very similarly about AP Wire. And I know that they are a for-profit organization. I also know that there are a lot of news outlets who have not renewed their contract with them. And that's terrifying. That you wouldn't have AP Wire as one of your primary sources of news information. You know, in the old movies, when news information was coming across a ticker tape, that was the AP Wire. Like, it literally was a wire of whatever on-the-ground reporter they had, sending literally just the facts, like old school journalism. I don't know. I don't know that we'll ever get back to that at all.
Yeah, I mean, our attention span has definitely been changed.
Well, I think the mistake was trying to fill 1 hour or 2 hours a day with news to trying to have a 24-hour news channel. Like, when you don't have enough news to fill that, what do you have? Commentary.
Right.
Opinioned commentary. And so you end up with a news channel that is 23 hours of opinionated commentary that speaks to the needs and desires of the ownership of the company instead of the actual news that's being reported on. So yeah, there is that.
Yeah, the 24-hour news cycle is almost the death of news.
It was the death of news, 100%. I think that brings us back to making sure that you don't get your news in one place. You know, multiple sources is so important. Fact checking. You can fact check. Like if you hear something reported on a national news channel about a local area, go to the local news.
Yeah, I really
Local
enjoy doing
news, I
that.
think, are the last bastion of. I think local news media are the last bastion of factual based reporting, but even they are being snapped up by Murdoch and Turner.
Hmm. Yeah,
Like there's
there's
so many local news stations who've been bought up by the big conglomerates, and now all of their scripting is right out of those major media channels. Like you can't tell the difference between your local channel and a, you know, news broadcast. Anyway, okay, telling the truth. What else is a good one? Because I like
how about you tell the
that's one of
truth
the biggest
too?
pushbacks. That's
Like,
one of the biggest pushbacks I get from family is, oh, that's not true. And I'm like, no, it is true. Like, and here are my sources. And oh my God, why would you say that wasn't true? Like, just what the most likely circumstances that it's true or not true. I don't know. It's
it
frustrating. It's frustrating.
it is. It's very frustrating. Oh,
Like, it's also important to be able to tell the difference between a belief and a fact. Just because you believe something doesn't mean it's true. Right? And
yes,
that's really hard to converse around with people
that's very
when their
true.
beliefs get mixed up in the facts.
Or people have a position that because they believe something, therefore you have to believe it. Like that's an
Right.
imperative. But I do have a tendency towards hyperbole, I believe. I try not to. I actually try to watch for that. Sometimes I find it a fun, just talking device to make things more entertaining, but that could be problematic too. But I'm also from
So give me
Texas,
an
so tall
example,
tales. Oh man, I can't.
like storytelling instead of.
Yeah, yeah. Just I can't think of anything offhand, but now I brought it up, and I'm like, oh well, now I can't think of anything. If I think of something,
No
I'll
worries.
I'll bring it up. But I do think like having your own like don't repeat things that you aren't sure about. No,
Oh yeah, that's a dangerous one.
or if you do,
Repeating
couch
it
it
just
in
because you heard it.
right.
Yeah.
Unless you have there's a reason why you found it interesting. Be like, I heard this piece of news. I find it interesting because, but I try to caveat of like whether I know it's true or not. And we're like, it hasn't
Yeah.
been researched, but I'm finding it interesting because, um, it's
Yeah, I
like
find
the
myself all
Project
the time saying,
2025 kind of thing of like, okay, I I have reason to believe that it is connected to the Trump organization, mainly because his name is mentioned over 300 times, and the authors of it have a vast number of them were part of his former administration and have ties to agencies that support him. So there's legitimate reasons to see that it is connected, um, the Project 2025 to the Trump organization, without saying that he is an author himself.
right. And this is another great example of the simplest explanation is probably the reality, and that is it more or less likely that he participated in the creation of that document? It is much more likely than it isn't. So,
I'm sure he had
yeah,
discussions around it, not necessarily structured discussions,
true.
which may like point to a different like, oh well, if I didn't
Oh, do I think
specifically
he
sit
sat down at
down,
a computer and wrote it? Absolutely
no,
not.
right? He didn't
Do
author
I
any
think
of it.
he No. Do I think he's actually read it in any amount of detail? Probably not.
No,
Do I think he endorsed and instructed the people who did write it to create a document that laid out the plans for his administration? Absolutely.
yes,
But is any of that based in fact? A lot of it's assumption.
Although there are
and
conversations
very
that can be pointed to when he's been on podcast and other
yeah,
um,
he's
not conventions,
yeah,
but like other public events that, or I should say, private public events. So it's people who are at Mar-a-Lago, where
yep,
they can recount some of these discussions that point towards his endorsement and support of many of these concepts.
yeah.
Yeah. Which is, I guess, as direct as we're trying, as direct as what we'll say on any of this in terms of politics. Although
Right.
we have very strong opinions,
We do have strong opinions.
which we
I'm not
believe
afraid to
people,
state those strong opinions. I think, but yeah.
but
Okay, other
we want to be
practical.
inclusive, though. That I mean, and I think that's part of truth. Is like, I think the truth of things shouldn't be hurtful, but it should lead you towards making better decisions,
Yes.
and that's part
I
of the
think
importance of.
making a well-informed decision is important based on your values and beliefs. And I think like we're always going to have a difference of opinion in politics. Um,
Hopefully, We-
I
that's
mean, even
important.
within your own party, across party lines, whatever. And I think that difference of opinion is important. It's what leads to better decision making in the long run. And good debate is essential to the survival of a democracy. Um, what is not essential to a survival of a democracy is the silencing of any part of your population or limiting their ability to cast their vote when they are legitimate citizens. Um,
Oh, don't get me started about
oh,
keeping people from voting. Oh, it's just that is a visceral thing. It was like I literally one of the reasons why I joined the military is my belief in the uniqueness of our Constitution.
yeah,
Was it written by people who represented me? Actually, no. And that, but I do believe that it is a document that can mature and holds principles that are valuable to our society and should be supported and defended. And I decided to put my own blood on the line for a number of years for that concept. And part of
yes,
that is people voting and having the right to have a say and a voice in a representative democracy or republic for
yep,
that matter. So, yeah. Don't I think that everybody who is a citizen and has a right to vote, like they should be immediately enrolled,
yep,
and
I agree.
that we
Automatic enrollment.
we should be because people are part of the society. They're contributing. They're
Well,
here.
didn't we get when we got our licenses in our current state? Didn't that automatically register us to vote?
I
Because
don't.
it's an identity, like it's an identity certification. I'm pretty sure I never actually registered. It just magically happened.
I well, I don't know if that's still true.
It's probably not, but I'm
Um,
almost convinced that one of the things we got when we got our driver's licenses,
I
because
believe,
they ask you for everything, like we had to turn in birth certificates and passports and all kinds of crap.
and that had to
You
do
know,
with
it's
the star. It was the that
proof
it.
of identity, right?
hmm It's like so we could travel in airports
Yeah.
and
But
use our
it was
driver's.
enough to say if you had to go through that process regardless, then you also were eligible to be registered to vote. And if you'd like to do that, they could automatically register you. And they did.
Yeah, I believe
Now, yeah,
that's
that's
true. I just like it's different for every state.
yeah.
It's definitely different for every state. So, but I at the
I
time I
would like
believe
to
that was
see,
probably yeah. I'd be interested to look up on the legislation on that now to see where that is. I just know like there's so many voter rolls that are being purged, and my name got purged when I was in college because
yeah.
of they didn't want college students in the area to have a voice, and so they purposely set up rules to make it more difficult. But you're still allowed to vote. It just means that sometimes even if you do vote, it won't be counted unless there's a tie or within a certain percentage, which seems ridiculous. It's like if you're allowed to vote, if you're authorized and legally should be allowed to vote, then it should be counted regardless of whether it's a tie or not.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
There is a lot of the voter suppression over the last however many years, decade, I guess, has been targeted at college age kids, making it impossible. Many states implemented like birth certificate laws where they have to show their birth certificate in order to vote. And what kid has their birth certificate with them on campus? Like, that's usually at home with their parents in a safety deposit box. Like, that's ridiculous.
Well, they also have so in North Carolina, the biggest university system, the university system of North Carolina is being sued by the Republican Party because one of the campuses has gone to digital IDs. And so for North Carolina, you can show your university, your public university ID, because it's a state ID, and you can show that to vote. That is legally true.
It's a legitimate state ID.
So now, but they're being sued of whether the like electronic version of that is considered a secure document to be able to show who you are as the ID for voting. So that's what they're being sued over. And so it's the it's the UNC system. And I think that's ridiculous. Like, why are you, the university has gone through the measures of creating a legitimate ID system, but like our state didn't even have an ID.
Endorsed.
The state didn't even have an ID law 2 years ago. Like it's a new requirement.
Yep.
So yeah, it was like, so why are we wasting money on these types of lawsuits? That's what bothers me, because I'm all about how is our money spent? How are organizations that are supposed to be representing our country, our communities, our political beliefs spending their time and treasure? Is it suing over who has rights to do stuff and taking those away? Or is it what?
Do you know why they're wasting time? Because they've been lied to.
Well, they also they went.
Have been lied to. People have been lied to about voter fraud.
It is yes.
People have been lied to about voter fraud, and so the public, in their fear that voter fraud is actually a thing, which it's not, it is a statistically insignificant incident of like less than 0.0001%. And I have news for you: the most voter fraud that's been perpetrated has been on the conservative side. Just FYI, and not by illegitimate or illegal aliens. Illegal immigrants do not vote.
No, it's too risky for them.
What part of that is unclear? They don't vote.
Wait, there was one case where somebody voted a month before because they were given the information, but they said their oath the next month, and they voted early. Or they went to vote early and realized that no, actually they're not. So they didn't even actually vote, but they thought they were legally allowed to. That was the only case that they found for illegal aliens voting.
Only case. And when somebody gives you, 107 cases of
I'm sure there's
voter
more.
fraud in the state,
Yeah.
you need to look at the data. Go find the study. The study was from 1985 to 2016. 100 cases.
And I think your point of like, is it statistically
over
significant?
35 years. Like, give me a break.
That's better than Six Sigma right there.
It is. That's run a business that way, people. You'll be rich. Anyway. The tiny few exceptions should not disenfranchise the majority of large communities from voting.
I have a
immoral.
Yes.
And should be illegal.
It is illegal, actually. It's illegal to prevent people from voting who have a legal. It is illegal. It keeps going up in front of the Supreme Court, but we choose to parse it in ways to act like we're just trying to protect voter rights. No, that's not what's happening. That's not what's happening. That's the sad part about it.
That's the lie. That's the lie they're telling you.
That is the lie.
And listen to us because we're voices of authority.
We're fishing, which is super
We're
important. 'Cause
fishing
it's
and talking,
exciting.
which gives us all the access to all the truth.
We
No,
go-
seriously, go look it up. The incidence of voter fraud is statistically insignificant in this country. We
Yeah.
have one of the best, most secure voting systems on the planet.
On record, yes.
On record. What part of we have like Fort Knox and the stock market and huge companies that mostly keep all of your data safe forever and ever, including the banks? Like, we have systems that are secure enough to manage your money. Why on earth would you think that our voting system is worse than that? It's not. It's amazing. It's secure, and if it weren't, like, we'd be living in a third world country, but we're not. We live in America, and this is a great place already.
We can't make things worse, though. That is a possibility.
We can make it worse. Make it worse again. You can choose that option.
There's a reason why we have a concept of moving forward. The one thing I was gonna say, and look up the exact numbers, but is compare the amount of money that immigrants pay in taxes, whether illegal or legal or undocumented, however you want to specify it. So how much they pay in taxes versus the largest public corporations and what they pay in taxes.
That's a terrifying disparity, isn't it? Largest corporations not paying diddly squack.
They got money back. The 4 largest corporations within the United States received money from the government instead of paying taxes. Versus,
Yeah,
I
they paid 0
believe
taxes.
it's like 92 million. I don't know what the number. It was like a significant portion of money from immigrants.
Whereas the hardworking lady working at your favorite taco place, who is in the process of getting her paperwork done to the tune of $15,000 to $20,000
over 7
You
years.
didn't know how much it costs or how long it takes to become a citizen, and the fact that that process is insane. And she is doing everything in her power to make that happen legally. And she is paying more taxes than our Fortune 500 companies.
Yep.
That
Check
is
it out.
crazy.
I was like, yeah, some of the numbers.
look at it.
But I was like,
Yep.
I'm trying not to give you exact numbers because it some changes and some companies do pay taxes. So,
Sure.
but
Yeah, but like on an average of like 7 to 9%. Like, it's ridiculous. Or 3%. I don't even know. It's bad.
see, I have the controversial view in terms of citizenship, which is I think you can vote and participate if you prove you paid taxes. So you have it paid.
Amen. If you're gonna come here and work and pay taxes, yes, you can vote.
Yep, have a say.
Like, there should be due process and all that, but hell yeah. You're contributing to our society? Absolutely.
You should have a voice. Why not?
You should have a voice. Yep. Agree. Okay.
But it's,
Yeah, voter suppression bad.
It
All
is
these
based
laws
on
they
laws,
say are designed to prevent voter fraud. They're lying. They are voter suppression laws by and large. But all that aside,
mhm.
everybody should go to vote.org. Super easy. www.vote.org. You can check your current voter registration status in your state. Find out how to register. Voting deadlines are coming up soon. A lot of states.
Yeah, we're past the
beginning of the
national
month.
registration date, but a lot of states do have same day registration. It's just
no,
different
most
things.
states, like, the registration dates expire sometime in
It's coming
October.
up. They're coming up. Like,
Yeah, they're coming up like
Don't
within the
wait.
next couple of weeks. So
Don't
go
wait.
get your butt registered and go vote.
and
Vote.
vote the
Vote,
first
vote,
day
vote
you
like your
can.
lives depend on it. Yep.
And if you
Well,
hate
I like
what
the
if
second
you
or
just
third day because I don't want to stand in line.
it's cheaper. It's cheaper for your political party the earlier you vote. Because the process to vote and to try to make sure that you there's actually a dollar value associated to at what time you vote towards the political party that you're supporting. Just putting that out
seems
there.
weird and bizarre to me. What are you talking about?
So it really has to do with them tracking and trying to convince voters to go out and vote. Therefore, like, the first day of voting
Oh, you're
costs
saying
you
they'll
about
spend less money on advertising if there are a higher turnout in early days.
yes.
Okay, because they have access to
the
Who
voter
has
rolls.
voted, not how they voted.
No,
but
no, not
who
how they voted. So yeah, and so like,
Okay.
but they generally,
That
like
makes sense.
most parties, generally focus in on their core constituents as you get closer and closer to the voting point.
They are not going to stop advertising in our state until the
No,
actual
but
day
you've
of
got
voting.
door knockers, and that costs money to have
Sure.
and to come like to print rolls and get rolls. And anyways, everything costs
And we've
money.
had 3. If they don't know that we're voting by now, like, hello.
Yeah, but
Oh, we're a good demographic. Barely.
yeah, but I get it from both sides since I'm a registered independent and do vote independent.
Yeah.
Like you gotta. I mean, sometimes it's
Just
you gotta
just vote.
Just
Just
vote.
vote. I would not recommend voting third party right now in
Oh,
this
no,
election,
no.
but if that's
Yeah, don't.
because our
I'm not saying
reality
vote
is
third
that
party. I'm saying
no,
I'm saying make an informed decision for what you feel like is.
save that statement for another election. This is not the election.
Oh,
Make
actually,
that statement.
there's a lot of people who have done written in votes and realized how useless that was. And actually, I'm in that party. I think there are some elections that are less meaningful because there's not a huge differentiation between the candidates when it really comes down to it. It's really a question
I
of
think
who
all
they.
elections are meaningful.
No,
mean,
and
yeah,
I'm
you can
saying
say
no, I'm saying
candidates
it's
are
important, but
similar.
I'm saying that like at the core of it, I didn't feel like there was a huge differentiation between the candidates. I still thought it was extraordinarily meaningful to vote. But
Yes.
in that case, it was like I did write somebody's in because I felt like that name did better represent it, and I was equally happy and unhappy with either candidate at that level. So it was like I was willing to say my vote. It's really what they call a throwaway vote, but I'm not willing to do
It
that in this
absolutely was a
case.
throwaway vote.
Yeah, and
Yeah.
but that had to do
We
with
have a
because
two-party system, folks.
yes, completely two
Like
party.
right now, we have a two-party system. Save your SJW moments for after this election, please.
And
Go in there and vote for somebody who's on the ticket.
yes.
Well, I say that some states are going to have people that aren't running anymore on the ticket, but do your research.
Hey, did you know they sent out ballots that didn't have Kamala Harris on listed as a presidential candidate?
Whoa, really? Talk about voter suppression. What state?
They sent it was sent out to the military. It was several thousand early vote by mail. I don't remember which state it was. I think they've rectified that obviously by now, but and they also misspelled Tim Walz's name on one of them. They put Tom Walz instead of Tim Walz.
Vice President's name was briefly missing from an electronic ballot in Montana. Provided to Montanans voting overseas.
Mm-hmm.
It was fixed the same day.
Yeah. Okay, so it was Montana. Yeah, it was not that many, but yeah. But it did happen, which is kind of incredible to know that it did.
I mean, yeah, one voting system out of all of them does a snafu. Like, yeah.
Well, this is why it's problematic to be changing who's on the ballot at this late of date and other things, because that's a controversy in itself.
Yeah. Okay, we're like way over time. I was trying to wrap this up by going back full circle to how to tell the truth versus not and get your vote on. Vote.
Definitely get your vote on.
However you need to do it. Early ballot, mail-in ballot, all the things. Vote on the day. I really recommend early voting. So much easier. Especially with all the states having pretty darn decent early voting nowadays. Not as long as we used to have, but we still have it for a couple of weeks.
Yeah, I know a lot of people who
Winnie.
Yeah, just vote.
Just vote.
Just vote.
This has been Winnie Wriggle.
And I'm Physics. Till next week. Bye.
Till next week, another fun-filled political podcast. CODCAST.
Maybe we'll just talk about lying. Just no truth.
Right.
No
Hi,
truth
Drake.
with
I
it.
see you. Drake says, try living in one of the most gerrymandered states in the union. Yeah, that's a whole other episode. Also, good morning.
Which
Good morning,
isn't.
sir. We're about to take off for the day. But I was glad you stopped by, my friend. Okay, y'all.